Product provided by Nintendo. Thank you, Nintendo. Sonic and Shadow Generations features a new remaster of 2011's Sonic Generations and a completely new game called Shadow Generations. And would you believe it, this is actually my first Sonic game ever. So can I just beg to Sonic fans, please don't rip me apart in the comments based on what I say in this video. In any case, what did I think after finally drop dashing my way into the Sonic universe? Let's go through my overall experience playing a Sonic game for the first time ever, what I liked and what I disliked. Within the first few minutes, it's clear that Sonic Generations feels like a celebration of Sonic's history. The fact that we get to see both Sonic's classic design alongside his modern design, it feels like something straight out of a fan fiction. With a name like Generations, you of course get to see the greatest generations of Sonic as a character. I will say some of the cutscenes in which the modern Sonic and friends are completely oblivious to the fact that classic Sonic is a completely different hedgehog
And then it looks like it dragged your friends here. I mean, our friends. You know what I mean.
It's a little bit cringy. But as a first-time Sonic player, I had no idea that apparently every level and boss battle is representative of a different Sonic game, from the original Sonic the Hedgehog to Sonic Colors. And even just the fact that the game starts out with Sonic and friends celebrating his birthday, which lined up with Sonic's 20th anniversary in 2011, I think is a cute way to really drive home this celebration of all things Sonic. There are also a whole bunch of collectibles that you can get, once again really celebrating Sonic's history, so if anything, I love the fact that Sonic Generations feels like a gift for the fans. Now, I imagine this has been said to death in the last 14 years since this game first came out, but Sonic Generations makes one heck of a first impression with its gameplay. And actually, from the very little I know about Sonic games, I believe most Sonic games do a really great job at front-loading the games with the most exciting and hype gameplay. With Sonic Generations, the first few classic and modern Sonic levels are so fast-paced and hectic, it made for a really crazy experience as a first-timer. You're running through these grasslands, beaches, or cities with a whole bunch of twists, turns, loops, and jumps. Then all of a sudden, a gosh dang darn dolphin pops out of nowhere, or a giant truck starts chasing after you through the city. It definitely kept me on my toes as I awaited what crazy thing was gonna happen in the next level. And with Sonic being so well known for, you know, gotta go fast, there's so much crazy things happening in these levels, and it definitely makes for a very exciting experience as you're, you know, looking through all of the levels and trying to find all of the nooks and crannies and stuff like that. And speaking of the levels, I think it was interesting to see how they incorporated so many different ideas throughout every single level. For example, you obviously have the tried and true level where Sonic is snowboarding down the streets of San Francisco. You also have a level where Sonic starts driving a car. Like, there is such variety in the ideas that they throw into these levels. Once again, really making it so that it's tough to be bored because every single turn there's some kind of new exciting thing that happens. And even just the fact that with other linear, you know, level-based games like these, you often will have a world in which all of the levels match the sort of theme of the world, whether it's grass or desert or lava. But with Sonic Generations, every level has its own theme, and it feels like there's a lot of variety in each area. So no two levels feel the same, at least back to back. It makes it easier to differentiate every level. I also want to quickly touch on the classic versus modern Sonic debate. With every level having both a classic Sonic version and a modern Sonic version, after a while I think I realized that I'm actually a bigger fan of modern Sonic's gameplay. Don't get me wrong, classic Sonic is obviously, well, classic, but the 3D perspective really gives modern Sonic levels way more room to work with. If we compare modern Sonic levels to classic Sonic levels, the classic Sonic levels feel a lot more linear and I guess a lot more focused. It feels very straightforward in that you start at an area and then you just try to get to the end of the level. Whereas with modern Sonic levels, because of that whole extra dimension, it feels like there are way more crazy and zany things happening with the modern Sonic levels. Also, I find the actual gameplay mechanics of modern Sonic to be more satisfying than classic Sonic. And the main reason comes down to 3 words: Ho Ming Attack. I think the homing attack is one of the best mechanics of modern Sonic. It can feel more difficult to manually aim and jump on enemies with classic Sonic, especially because of the fact that, with Sonic, you're always kind of pushing yourself to go as fast as possible, so jumping and aiming on an enemy becomes a bit of an issue if you're trying to just quickly rush through the level. Meanwhile, with modern Sonic, all you have to do is jump and then it'll automatically home onto an enemy. I actually found myself losing so many lives just due to the fact that when I switched from modern to classic Sonic, I falsely expected to be able to pull off a homing attack. And hey, there's just something satisfying about pulling off a bunch of homing attacks back to back. It's interesting because the game even says that classic Sonic is supposed to be sort of the easier levels of the two, while modern Sonic is a bit more difficult, when in fact I actually thought it was the opposite way around. I had an easier time with modern Sonic, especially because of the homing, but I guess maybe that just means that since classic Sonic is mostly just 2D gameplay, it's easier for people who aren't super familiar with 3D types of games. Now, before I dive into my dislikes with this game, I just want to apologize to any Sonic fans for what I'm about to say. Some of these things may seem a bit more nitpicky than others, but in any case, strap in for some Sonic slander, I guess. First off, I wasn't the biggest fan of the hub world or stage selection area. It's this giant white void that, for me, especially on first entering, is quite difficult to explore. There's not really any direction of how to progress. A lot of the time, since it's essentially just a white void, it can be difficult to tell what is or isn't a platform. There's not really any direction of how to progress, and sometimes it's just straight up frustrating that you can't reach a certain part of this white void. Look at this. The place I need to get to is right there. Just let me go there. And speaking of this white void, a lot of the times with hub worlds, you'll be able to get a general idea of where you have or haven't already explored to because there will be familiar areas that you recognize. But once again, this is a white void, so it can be kind of tough to remember where you have or haven't already been because, you just look around and you see white. And for my next trick, I'm going to complain about the size of the font on the title screen. No, in all seriousness, I can understand that these might seem like little nitpicks, but I honestly would not have minded at all if the level select screen was just that, a simple level select screen. Having this whole hub world white void made it a bit more complicated than I think it needed to be. I think there could have been a way to streamline how easy and quickly it could be to jump into a stage, rather than going on a hunt to find the next stage to go to. Okay, so that may have felt like a bit of a shallow complaint to make about this game, but now I have something more important to complain about. This one strand of Sonic's fur is not aligned. No, in all seriousness, I'm not the biggest fan of some of the changes in pace that happen throughout the game. For example, in one level, you might find yourself dashing all over the place and trying to go as fast as you possibly can, but then all of a sudden you have to completely stop and do some very intricate platforming. Maybe this just has to do with my preconceived notion that Sonic always has to be going fast, but just having to stop dead in my tracks and then jump on a platform and wait for that platform to slowly rise, it can sometimes feel a bit jarring coming from the very just exciting and crazy gameplay earlier. And I think some of that same thing also applies to the boss battles. For example, this boss battle with Robotnik where you have to be careful about running around the level and dodging all of the missiles and whatnot. I don't know, I think with Sonic, you always want to be going fast, and having to completely change that play style and actually take your time with the boss battles, it just doesn't feel too natural, I guess. And with the way that Sonic controls and the way that he plays in these levels, it can become a bit frustrating and difficult to get used to having to actually stop and walk slowly as Sonic the Hedgehog. Now let me just say, I totally understand this may just be a personal preference type of thing. Just because I'm not a big fan of a certain type of gameplay doesn't make it bad or anything like that. I'm not out here trying to yuck anyone's yum, but it is something that I noticed while playing the game. But hey, the cool thing about this release is that there is a whole nother game included. Shadow Generations is a pretty neat addition to this release. It adds even more value to a remake, remaster, whatever you want to call it, of a beloved Sonic game. The game starts out with a full-on cutscene regarding Shadow's story. As many Sonic fans tried to make abundantly clear to me, Shadow isn't necessarily the villain in the world of Sonic. This story shows how Shadow became somewhat of a friendly rival to Sonic, in an attempt to keep a promise to a fallen friend. And something I thought was really cool about Shadow Generations is that it actually connects to the storyline of Sonic Generations. At the beginning of Shadow Generations, we can see the portal in which Sonic and friends are having their birthday party. And once again, as Sonic fans try to make abundantly clear to me, it doesn't even necessarily matter which order you play Sonic Generations and Shadow Generations. Just the fact that Shadow Generations is happening alongside Sonic Generations is pretty cool. Now, in terms of the actual gameplay, there are some really interesting and fun mechanics found in Shadow Generations. This game starts off with a really crazy and just exciting and overwhelming level in which you also learn some of the controls of Shadow Generations. This game takes a lot of the satisfying gameplay of Sonic Generations, but also builds and adds upon them. For example, Shadow's homing attack feels more, I guess, snappier and almost futuristic compared to Sonic's one, which makes for a really awesome and satisfying way to attack enemies. Shadow also has a really cool ultimate move, in which after filling up your meter, you can actually slow down quick-moving projectiles. This allows you to actually slow them down enough to use them as platforms and jump on them. I am such a sucker for any gameplay mechanic in which you can alter time, so this was a very welcomed move that I really enjoyed using. I guess speaking of which, I can also mention the fact that Shadow Generations feels a lot more gritty than Sonic Generations. With all of the enemies and the levels themselves, it feels almost cyberpunk at times. Like, it's a really interesting type of environment, especially when you compare it to Sonic Generations. Even just the fact that you have this very contrasting white background of Sonic Generations and then the black background of Shadow Generations, I think it really shows the differences that you'll find between these two games. The hub world in Shadow Generations is also very cool. This time around, you can actually almost free roam this area, and the levels are found across this map. There are little objectives, or I guess like side missions, that you can actually do on the hub world itself before going into a level. It makes this whole level selection area feel a lot more lively, and like there are actually a lot of things to do besides just going into the levels themselves. Putting these two games together makes for a very wonderful Sonic package. It's definitely a great new way to experience the original Sonic Generations, as well as something brand new with Shadow Generations. Once again, thank you so much to Nintendo for providing me a copy of this game. If you want to see my gameplay video of Sonic and Shadow Generations, check it out below. Also, let me know in the comments what you guys think about this game. But for now, thank you for watching. Thank you so much to all of our members. My name is Chase, and I will see you guys again soon. Bye.